Please help me welcome Governor Gary Johnson.
So I am an entrepreneur. I'll share with you the fact that when I was 13 years old, I wanted a motorcycle. And I asked my folks, can I have a motorcycle? No, you can't, you can't, you can't. And then one day I went up to my mom and said, well, how about if I bought it? I'm 13 years old. She was, oh, sure, if you're going to buy it, sure. And about 8 weeks later, I bought the motorcycle because I immediately went out and I scoured the neighborhood to take on lawn jobs and odd jobs in the neighborhood and actually came up with that money. It really made a difference in my life. And I did, in 1974, I started a one-person handyman business in Albuquerque, me. And in 1994, actually had 1,000 employees, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, pipe fitting. Really, the American dream come true. It was just based on showing up on time, keeping my word, doing what I said I would do for people, doing a little bit more than what I said I would do for people. And that was the basis for the success. And I did sell that business in 1999. Nobody lost their job, and the business is doing better than ever. And for me, money has always been about freedom. So to be able to have my freedom really has been a goal that I've had my entire life. In 1993, I view my foray into politics as entrepreneurial. I had never been involved in politics prior to running for governor of New Mexico. I went and I introduced myself to the Republican Party a couple of weeks before I announced, and what they said was, hey, we like you, we like what you've got to say, but you need to know that you'll never get elected. It's not possible to come from completely outside of politics and get elected to governor of the state, especially when the state is 2-to-1 Democrat. Well, I got elected. And why? Well, what I promised to do was to bring a common sense business approach to state government. What I promised to do was that everything was going to be a cost-benefit analysis. Everything. Best product, best service, lowest price. I got elected. I got reelected. And I got reelected, I think, on the fact that I way over-delivered on those initial promises. What I did as governor of New Mexico was really, I put a stop to billions of dollars worth of spending. What I did as governor of New Mexico, again, keep in mind, 2-to-1 Democrats. So why would Democrats vote for somebody that vetoes everything, that vetoes all sorts of spending? Well, what I did is I vetoed spending that benefited individuals or corporations or well-connected communities politically, as opposed to policy that affected everyone equally. And I think everybody saw that. And I think that it really made a difference. And you know, legislators will legislate absolutely anything. You know that, right? There was a bill because some kid hurt his head pole vaulting in northern New Mexico. There was a bill on my desk to make it mandatory that high schoolers wear helmets pole vaulting. Now, I pole vaulted in high school and I vetoed the bill. I just thought that that should be a choice. What do you all think about helmet legislation for motorcycles? Well, you know what? It's a great idea, right? It's a terrific idea. It's what we should do. I ride a motorcycle. I wear protective clothing tip to toe. I wear a helmet. It's a good idea. And Nebraska has to have the same issue that New Mexico does, and that is that we have severe organ donor shortages in both states. And to sign legislation requiring helmets is going to dry up that organ donor. I vetoed a bill in New Mexico that would have become law that was the dog and cat exercise bill. It was a bill that, it was a Republican bill that required pet stores to exercise their dogs and cats 3 times a week, 2 hours a day. Now I gotta tell you, that's a great idea. And that's where I want to buy my dogs and cats, is in a store that says, we exercise our dogs and cats 2 hours a day, 3 times a week. That's where I want to buy my dogs and cats. But if I sign that bill, which I vetoed, if I signed that bill, then the next thing you know, I would have had to have funded the dog and cat exercise police. So that's kind of legislators. I vetoed billions of dollars worth of spending. I will tell you, I did not add 1 penny of entitlement, of pension entitlement liability to the state of New Mexico. Not 1 single tax was raised in the state of New Mexico over an 8-year period. That had never happened before. I vetoed hate crime legislation. I don't know about you all, but the government is going to arbitrate my motives for committing a crime? I mean, prosecute me for throwing a rock through someone's window, but enhance the crime because I'm motivated by hate? That hate crime legislation scares me to death. There were a couple of things that I was known for nationally. One was the vetoes. One was the fiscal responsibility, which I really am proud of. I really think that it made a difference. Another was school choice. I am an absolute firm advocate of school choice and of school vouchers. One of the promises that I made running for governor was I said I was going to increase the amount of money that we spent on education as a percentage of the budget, and did that for 8 straight years. But for all the money that we put into education, by all measurements, we get a little bit less back, year after year after year. So for 6 straight years, I proposed that every student in the state of New Mexico get a voucher that I believe would have brought about competition to public education and would have dramatically improved public education. And I believe that to this day. Why can we not have educational entrepreneurs unleashed on a system to deliver a better product, a better service at a lower price? And the whole notion of even trying to predict what the free market would bring to education, I think is a mistake. Free market might be a video game where kids get locked into the video game in the morning, and it's the most fun video game they've ever participated in, and it's about knowing history and mathematics and languages to proceed in the game. Like I say, I just find that as an exciting notion that would make a difference in this country. Another thing that I wanted to do as governor of New Mexico, cost-benefit analysis. You know, it was all about cost and benefit. I really wanted to take a hard look at the war on drugs. And I wanted to include legalization as a potential alternative to what we were doing currently. Now, where I came at this from was the fact that half of what we spend on law enforcement, the courts, and the prisons is drug-related. About $70 billion a year. And what are we getting for that $70 billion a year? We're arresting 1.8 million people a year in this country on drug-related crime. I always point out that that's the population of New Mexico every single year that we're arresting. So when I came out on this issue, which was simply to look at the issue, I thought, well, I guess I might as well start with Holland, which according to the government at that time, and this was 1999, which at that time the government was saying Holland had skyrocketing drug use and that crime was out the roof, and it all had to do with drugs. The fact that they had effectively decriminalized the use of all drugs. Well, it turns out Holland has 60% the drug use as that of the United States. That's on a per capita basis. That's marijuana, that's hard drugs, that's kids, and that's adults. Portugal, within the last few years, has effectively decriminalized the use of all drugs. And amazingly, and this is just counterintuitive, but amazingly, they're showing statistics that show that there's been an actual decrease in drug use as a result of this.
And Holland and Portugal have the lowest drug usage rates in all of Europe. So after studying this issue for a very short amount of time, I came to the conclusion that 90% of the drug problem is prohibition-related, not use-related, and that is not to discount the problems with use and abuse, but that ought to be the focus. So I advocate the legalization of marijuana, and when I say legalize marijuana, it is never going to be legal to smoke pot, become impaired, get behind the wheel of a car. Never going to be legal to smoke pot, become impaired, do harm to others. It's never going to be legal for kids to smoke pot. And when it comes to all the other drugs, I advocate harm reduction strategies. The things that we really care about, reducing death, disease, crime, corruption. Let's look at all these other drugs first from the standpoint of a health issue rather than a criminal justice issue. So fast forward, I get out of office January 1 of 2003, and I was term limited, and I believe in term limits. I think term limits is a good thing. I think politicians do the right thing as a result of not seeking re-election. That we as an electorate, we benefit from politicians that aren't in there as long as they might be otherwise. So I find myself absolutely outraged this last summer over the fact that this country is bankrupt. And by bankrupt, 43 cents out of every dollar that we're currently spending is borrowed. The government is printing money to cover these obligations. The result of this is going to be a weakened dollar. The result of this is going to be inflation. It's out there, it's coming, it's going to happen. Promises that were made that should have never been made. We need to slash government spending. And I'm talking about Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. Medicaid, I think we need to capitate Medicaid. Medicare, I think there needs to be some means testing when it comes to Medicare. And let's not forget that when Medicare was adopted in the mid-60s, it was estimated to cost $10 billion in 1980, and it cost $100 billion in 1980. Today, it's $500 billion, and it hasn't even begun to see the pressure that it's going to see because of baby boomers now becoming eligible for retirement or for benefit. And Social Security. I think Social Security has to be a combination. For those that are on Social Security, I think that has to be the exempt area. But for those that haven't received Social Security, I think that the retirement age has to be raised and that there has to be a certain means testing when it comes to Social Security also. Look, this notion that we're going to hand this debt over to our kids or our grandkids is an absolute fallacy. That debt is here, it's now, it's today, and it's got to be dealt with, and it's not being dealt with. Things are getting worse. We're spending more money. Spending is completely out of control, and taxes are going up across the board. I just think that this is crazy, and that we're at the absolute precipice. The optimism here is that because we're at this precipice, that we might actually sustain this country significantly into the future if we're willing to address these problems. It'll never be easier to address these problems than right now, than today. It'll be extremely difficult to deal with them today, but today will be the easiest that they'll ever be able to be dealt with. And keep in mind, none of these issues are getting better. They're getting worse. So, free market plays a huge role in this. Whether free market is education, whether free market is in healthcare. When this healthcare debate was going on, I was thinking lower price, better product, better service, lower price. I had envisioned Gallbladders R Us, where you might come to Lincoln, Nebraska, because Lincoln, Nebraska had this gallbladder hospital that you could get gallbladder surgery for thousands of dollars as opposed to tens of thousands of dollars. We're getting on airplanes right now to go to India to have heart surgery at a cost of tens of thousands of dollars as opposed to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Healthcare, only area where there's no advertised pricing. Bring competition to healthcare, and yet we've moved further away from competition for healthcare. We have established insurance entitlement. And why insurance is even part of this? Catastrophic insurance might be part of it, but why don't we pay as we go? I think that could be a model going forward. Government could do a lot to eliminate impediments when it comes to healthcare entrepreneurs that would want to get involved in healthcare to deliver a better product, a better service at a lower price. And then looking at defense. This country has an obligation to provide for a strong national defense. It's one of the tenets of the Constitution. It's what we should be doing in this country. But I would argue that our defense, that our security is not being threatened in either Iraq or Afghanistan. I was opposed to us going into Iraq before that happened, believing that we had the military surveillance capability to see Iraq roll out any weapons of mass destruction. We could have gone in and dealt with that situation on a surgical military level. We could have dealt with it, and that if we went in, that we would find ourselves engaged in a civil war to which there would be no end. I thought that when we went into Afghanistan originally, that was completely warranted, that was about getting Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, but they're not there anymore. We're building roads, schools, bridges, hospitals in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we're borrowing 43 cents out of every dollar to do that. We've bankrupted ourselves. I don't think we're of any good to any country worldwide bankrupt. Of the dollar that's being spent on worldwide defense military spending today, 50 cents of that dollar is being spent by the United States. And we're 5% of the world's population. China is spending 8 cents out of that dollar, trying to put a little perspective to that 50 cents. Moving to immigration, and no pies, please, no pies, no tomatoes. That was left off of the... New Mexico is a border state. I don't want to say I know something about this. I want to refrain from saying that. But can we secure the borders with Mexico? Yes, we can. But what's the cost? What is the cost to put the National Guard arm in arm across 1,600 miles of border, and that's just Mexico? Then we turn to Canada and do that the same across 3,500 miles of border. So what's the cost and what's the benefit? I suggest to you, legal immigration, good thing. Illegal immigration, bad thing. So much of the problems around the border right now, border violence, is so much drug-related. Actually, marijuana drug cartel-related. Legalized marijuana, that goes a long way toward drying up the violence that exists. And let me just tell you, when it comes to crime, illegal immigrants, least amount of crime, legal immigrants, next amount of crime, and this is on a per capita basis, and then U.S. citizens, all right? No crime is acceptable. No crime is acceptable, but just understand that this is where this is at statistically. So make it easy for immigrants to get a work visa. And there's 3 stages to immigration. There's work visa, there's green card, and there's citizenship. Getting a work visa or setting up a grace period for the 15 million illegal immigrants that are in this country right now to get a work visa. And work visa is a Social Security card so that they can pay income tax, Medicare, and Social Security. Okay? But getting a work visa is in no way attached to getting citizenship, all right? Grace period, not attached to citizenship. And when it comes to immigration reform, which we desperately need, it's not about welfare. It's about work. It's not about welfare. So I think that we can, again, just from a cost-benefit analysis, if you would just look at this and study it a bit, that for the money that we spend, we can address illegal immigrants that are here and address that problem and send them back after a grace period would be set up for them, again, to be able to get this work visa. 1st of December, I established Our America Initiative. The idea was to try and put a voice to the outrage nationwide, and I wouldn't be here right now if what I'm saying was being said, and I wouldn't be here right now if what I'm saying I didn't think needed to be said. There's no they out there that's going to come to our rescue. It's you and it's me, and I think that we really do have an opportunity right now to make a difference. And I really appreciate your invitation to be here today. I've had a great time since we landed yesterday talking to a lot of you, and that would be cussing, discussing. And I would love to right now open it up to any comments, questions, or insults that any of you might have. Yes.
Sir, how would you address the fiscal problem, or actually monetary problem with the federal government?
How would I address?
Federal Reserve System?
Well, Federal Reserve, based on what I know on the, I think that the Federal Reserve ought to be transparent. I think the Federal Reserve ought to return to its original intent, which was the notion of price stability. That said, based on what I know about the Federal Reserve, if the Federal Reserve went through a vetting process through Congress to abolish the Federal Reserve, based on what I know, I would abolish the Federal Reserve. But I don't think that's going to happen. We can't even get an audit of the Federal Reserve. I just don't think that to be a reality. Based on what I know about returning to a commodity-based currency, if that same phenomenon happened, that it went through Congress, that it vetted through Congress, and presented itself to me as a bill, and I would sign off on that also, believing that that would lead to a strong dollar as opposed to a weak dollar.
So you talk about national security, and you talk about the Constitution. Two things come to mind. Are you advocating a pathway to citizenship or amnesty with this guest worker program?
No.
Okay, and with all these Americans out of work, do you really think it's necessary for a guest worker program with 10% unemployment, which is really more like 20%?
Well, as long as, so I said that talking about immigration and the fact that we have so many out of work in this country, I think contributing to out of work in this country is welfare in this country as opposed to work. That's something that also needs to get addressed. Do away with welfare, and so many of U.S. citizens that are currently receiving welfare are going to go back to work. They're going to find jobs. So that's kind of the two-prong. The other is, I think employers should determine whether or not there are jobs available, and if there aren't jobs available, immigrants are going to return. There are fewer immigrants today than there were 12 years ago.
Let me rephrase my question on this. Do you support guest workers over American workers?
No, I don't. But I don't think you can't. I think the reality, and again, as a border governor, the reality is that they are taking jobs that we don't want as American citizens. That's the reality.
It depends on where you live. So Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution talks about national security, and it talks about, it really talks about protecting us from invasion. How do you suppose we secure the borders? Do you suppose that do you suggest that we should leave them open? Or what's your plan? You don't think that it's practical to put soldiers on the border?
It's not. It's not. It's not possible.
Well, what is your solution then? How would you stop it?
How would I stop it? I would stop it through the fact that they're either going to be here to work, and if there's no work, they're not going to be here. But if there's work, they'll be here.
So a guest worker program.
A guest worker program, if you want to call it that.
That's kind of what it is, right?
Well, yeah, guest worker program, work visa, sure, you can call it that. But it's not a pathway to citizenship. Work visa, green card, citizenship. And in no way is the work visa attached to citizenship.
What is this go back thing you talk about?
Go back thing.
You said,
well, if they're from Mexico and there's no jobs available in the United States, they're going to go back on their own. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
It's enforcement through attrition.
Yes.
You enforce the employers.
Which, in fact, is what has happened over the last 12 years. There are fewer immigrants, legal, illegal, here in this country today than there were 12 years ago.
That's not actually true. Statistically.
Statistics.
Yeah.
If you have different, please let me know, because I don't want to be misspeaking, but that's my
I also
understanding.
grew up in a border state, and I watched my town get overrun by illegals because of the lack of the government to enforce Article 6, 1 and 8, and Article 4, Section 4, all because they just wanted the money over anything else. Now,
Well, and just for a second, too, let's not forget the basis for why we're all sitting here. We're all sitting here on the basis of legal immigration. And I agree, illegal immigration, bad. Legal immigration, good.
yeah, I just wanted to clarify that you don't support amnesty of any kind.
By amnesty, I'm going to call it a grace period where
No.
illegal immigrants be able to get a work visa. Not citizenship, no pathway to
I want to
citizenship.
be clear. To me, amnesty is to forgiving somebody for committing a crime. That come over here illegally, and I'm going to take this guy who's been working illegally for 2 years, and I'm going to give him this visa and tell him, okay, now you've been here illegally for 2 years, I'm going to give you this visa, and now I'm going to forget your past transgressions.
Okay, can I, if I can take such liberty here as to draw an analogy to the war on drugs, can we make this country drug-free? Yes, we can, at a cost. And that cost would be to line every single person in this country up and subject them to a drug test. And those that test positive go to jail. Those that don't can continue to work. And what's the benefit going to be when we finish that? Now, these are lawbreakers. These are people that have broken the law when it comes to our drug laws. How do we allow this to take place? Fact is, it's terribly discriminating, the law. It's terribly discriminating. You got 15 million illegal immigrants in this country, and you want to ship them back. 30 million?
It's about 30.
And you want to ship them back.
No, actually, I think the plan is attrition through enforcement. We start cutting off the reasons they come.
Sounds like the drug war to me. Just sounds like the drug war to me.
What you're saying is legal American citizens versus people that cross the border into a sovereign nation illegally.
Right, and if they can't work when they come over here, if they absolutely cannot get a job because now employers, again, have an easy way to grant this work visa, and if they don't have that work visa, if they don't have a Social Security card that's verifiable, then they're not going to hang around.
But how do they get that card? After being here for at least 2 years.
I think you have to set up a grace period to where you're going to give them that.
So it's forgiving them for their past.
If you want to see an economic 9/11 like you've never seen before, let's just ship back the 15 million illegal immigrants.
That's a very good issue. I think that guy has another question right there.
If I could ask only 2 questions. First of all, on the same note on the immigration issue, would they be here for less than minimum wage paying jobs if it wasn't supplemented by welfare? And if you took away the welfare, would that not help to dry up some of the illegal immigration and some of the cheap workers?
You know, I don't think that we're delivering welfare to illegal immigrants. We're not. Barring the emergency room. I think the emergency room is someplace that we are delivering. Not illegal. I mean, we've got some sort of documentation when it comes to schools.
On not enforcing the illegal status.
Well, this needs to be the focus. This needs to be the focus. We do not want illegal immigrants in this country. But that's the focus. That's where we put our resources, and that's where we actually get some bang and some enforcement and we actually make this happen.
So do you advocate if I go rob a liquor store, can I get forgiven for that crime too?
I think that that's a real hard. That's like saying, I mean, I got that argument all the time with regard to drugs. So I guess it's okay to commit murder. I guess it's okay to. No, it's never going to be legal to commit to do harm to another individual ever. That's what government ought to be enforcing. Real crime, whether that be property damage or individual harm against you or I. Yes.
See, your analogy to the drug war I thought was very good. But my question to you is, and I applaud you for taking on the decriminalizing marijuana issue. I applaud you for that. Because that's my question is you. Why are you drawing the line there? I mean, if it's okay to do that, and I think that it is, because I think it would cut the crime, stop pushing drugs to fifth graders if there was no profit in it, and if they were legal, there wouldn't be profit. But why not then cocaine? Why not any drug? I mean, I don't see where the logic is.
No, and I'll agree with you. I just think that that this country takes a big giant step forward by legalizing marijuana and understanding this notion of harm reduction and this notion of harm done to others. I'll share with you a story. Judges in Portland, Oregon wanted to meet with me in Portland, Oregon. And I didn't know what exactly that meeting was going to be like, but the meeting started off. They said, look, we're here. We agree with everything that you have to say. We would like to share with you anecdotally some stories here that you might be able to pass on to educate people. They said that methamphetamine is really the boogeyman drug. I mean, it really alters behavior significantly. It's a bad thing. When people do methamphetamine, their behavior is altered, and it's not for the good. They do bad things. They said, so they said it is the best example that we can think of a prohibition drug. Methamphetamine would, this is the judges talking, methamphetamine would probably not exist but for prohibition. Cheap, easy to make, the consequences then disparagingly fall on the poor. They said, we're not suggesting that cocaine be legal, but if cocaine were legal, these people would be doing cocaine instead of methamphetamine, and we would not have those issues. Understand that doing cocaine does not create that same behavior-altering behavior, but what it does is it puts holes in your heart, literally puts holes in your heart. So back to honest education regarding all this stuff, I just think legalizing pot is a first step toward really rational drug policy. And California's got it on their ballot this November. Massachusetts, the last general election, voted to decriminalize marijuana by a vote of 65 to 35. There have been no incidents in Massachusetts as a result of this happening. And in fact, they've stopped issuing citations in Massachusetts. Denver, 5 years ago, voted to decriminalize marijuana on a campaign based on marijuana being safer than alcohol. And that also passed. Yes, sir.
I would like to return to your comments about illegal immigration. And I am glad that you are against illegal immigration. Now, I found that your position is somehow inconsistent, because on the one side you say that you would like solve this problem by giving illegal immigration working permit. You know, if illegal immigrants will receive working permit, it is actually, you can call it whatever you want, but it is actually amnesty. Because those people came in order to work over here and take American jobs. And you already mentioned that when illegal immigrants get a job, it is actually on the expenses of some American worker, because this American worker will be displaced. And what happens to this worker? We, ordinary people, will pay his welfare and jobless benefit. So, going all around, we are still in the situation that illegal immigrants get work, they are paid but by substandard wages, and because they cannot really exist on the substandard wages, we ordinary taxpayers are supplement to those wages by various social gifts, I should say, because they can go to the emergency room, they can put their kids to the school again for taxpayers' money, and it goes all around. So it seems to me that suggestion that those people should get working permits, it's actually wrong. Those people should be sent back to their original countries. And if you say that they are doing jobs which American people don't like, this is not really true.
No.
It is true.
I remember a situation over here in Nebraska, I mean Lincoln, Omaha, and so on. Approximately 20 years ago, wages in this plant was around $18 per hour. Now, when illegal immigrants came, those wages are around $11 per hour. So this is where this problem is. American worker will not work for this $11 when they work for $18, but the illegals will work for it. They are paid those wages, and American workers are on the welfare. So this is where all this problem exists. And actually, to me, I can talk about many things, about crime, about diseases, and so on. But for me, main problem with this concept is that breaking law is rewarding. And to reward lawbreakers, this is something which is beginning of the end of all civilization. And for this reason, this is my main reason why I would like to send illegal immigrants back to their countries. We should protect soul of America. I came 30 years ago, approximately over here, and I would like to preserve America, which I found here for my grandchildren. If we will somehow, by working permits or different way, if we will somehow allow this 12, 20 million, or I don't know how many, illegal immigrants stay, they will completely change culture of this country. We will have different country, as already Mexico has, with all those problems which are over there. So this is my opinion toward this issue.
I'm going to let the governor get back to this in just a minute. Let me just say, it's almost 8 o'clock. I really want to have this, I really want to kind of adjourn and move to the next thing by 8:30. So if you can, try to keep your questions brief and questions, and see if the governor can answer those, okay?
Yes.
Governor, I have 2 questions. First of all, how do you envision this United States government ever getting to a point where we will spend what we take in and not engage in this deficit spending? And my second question is, what do you anticipate to be tougher, Everest or Ragnarok?
Everest will definitely be tougher than Ragnarok. And how do you envision us actually getting to this
to this state of revenues matching expenditures, I think that it's important to note that it's not getting better right now, that it's getting a lot worse. So significant in this equation would just be putting a stop to current spending, which isn't happening. So I think it's very realistic that, you know, if you liken this to a super tanker going down the waterway, what is it, 8 miles to be able to pull a U-turn for that super tanker? Look, at a point we just have to put the brakes on and try and start that turn.
No idea how that's done.
No, I would argue that was my situation as governor of New Mexico, that effectively we put the brakes on spending and really started a process of less spending, and nobody went without. Yes. Yes,
He was first.
Okay.
You gave us your position on Iraq and Afghanistan. So does that mean, do you also support bringing our troops home from not just Iraq and Afghanistan, but from all over the world where we have bases, over 130 countries?
Well, if you look at, let's just try and look at a couple of examples. One would be Korea. We have 100,000 troops in Korea. North Korea, South Korea, comparing those two countries, South Korea has 2.5 times the population of North Korea. They have 40 times the GDP. They also have nuclear weaponry, but so does South Korea, because the United States is allied with South Korea and offers the nuclear deterrent to North Korea. So the recent sinking of a ship by North Korea, the South Koreans really wanted to go in and bloody the nose of North Korea, but from my information, weren't allowed to do that because the United States didn't want to get involved in another conflict. So the United States is finding itself in the middle of a lot of conflicts that it probably shouldn't be. There's an example of North Korea. Should we have less of a presence in North Korea? Yes. And shouldn't we have less of a presence in Japan? Yes. And when it comes to Europe, shouldn't we have less of a presence? Yes. Should we be renegotiating all of these treaties that we're bound by? Yes.
If you were in Bobby Jindal's shoes, how would you have responded over the last 2 months?
Sounds like he's done a good job. I mean, he talked about the sand barges, which is really kind of the only thing that I heard him say that was something that would actually get done. And I know that there wasn't a response to that for so long, and now apparently that's being done. So I wouldn't pretend to know any of these solutions, and I certainly wouldn't point my finger at the Obama administration as being responsible for what's happening. It's unfortunate. I mean, we all recognize that. Way in the back.
Yeah, what I'd like to know about is if you were Mr. Obama, would you have used the aid of the foreign countries that offered to bring in ships, equipment to help fight the oil leak, in favor of letting the unions say that you cannot come in here because you are a foreign country and only U.S. nationals can crew those ships, which is the Jones Act?
No, I think that clearly, you know, again, looking at this in retrospect, and if in fact that's the way that it was, the Jones Act should have been waived, and that they should have been allowed to render that assistance. I mean, that just seems like a no-brainer. My question is, why wasn't that done? I don't understand. I wish the government were a better source of information during all this. That I think that they could even start tomorrow. They could become that better source of information.
Yes. Yes or a no? I didn't get that.
Yes, I would have waived the Jones Act. Yes, based on what I know about it.
While all these people have been, attacking you for trying to give away American jobs and stuff, I'd just like to applaud you from taking your one-man handyman business to employing over 1,000 people in New Mexico. And on that note, I'd like to know what, well, your America, our America, what your policies towards small business would look like, towards the burdens that they have, and tax specific, I guess.
Well, tax specific, that the United States would continue to lead the world when it comes to the economy, that the United States would continue to rule the world from an entrepreneurial basis. And so elimination of corporate income tax would be a starter, just understanding that corporate income tax is, corporations are owned by individuals that are taxed, and corporations right now are walking away from this country. They're headquartering themselves elsewhere as opposed to this country. And talking for a second too, we talked earlier, look, here's the future when it comes to China and trade with China. And whether this is China or whether this is India, India is going to send an automobile over here for sale that's going to sell for $4,000. Now you might say, I'm not going to buy that $4,000 car. Well, yes, you will. If that $4,000 car is the equivalent of what sells over here for $8,000 or even $12,000, you're going to buy that car. If it's the same product, at that much lower price, that's what's going to happen. That is what's going to happen from China and India. This is coming. When it comes to aerospace, the 737, Boeing 737, what does that sell for? $80 million? China is going to be producing a passenger jet airline for a lot less money. And this is what's going to happen.
Well, I was talking more about like workers' compensation taxes and overtime and that.
No, I know, but this country needs to be competitive with that, because that's what's going to happen. So these are businesses that these are industries that we've had, and for us to try and protect these industries that we have developed is one thing. It's not going to work. Moving forward, we need to continue to be the innovators. We need to continue to create these entirely new industries that are just now being thought of. But that can be government policy, and it's, again, we're moving in the opposite direction. So all the obvious things: workers' compensation, taxation, innovation. These are things that...
What I'm talking about is workers' comp. I'm talking about small business. My question was about small businesses.
But your small business becomes a large business if you've got some sensational idea, product, service.
I'll talk to you later. I'll explain better later.
No, I guess I'm really missing the point.
I was talking about pretty much, are you for businesses paying an unemployment taxes, workers' compensation, all the taxes that burden small businesses today? I was wondering if you were in charge.
Anytime you lower tax, you get more of what it is that you lower tax on. Anytime you increase tax, you increase unemployment tax, you get less employment. That's just the way that it works. And I know that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you didn't understand.
No. I thought it was pretty obvious. I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay, first off, the Chinese jet only can come with American parachutes, right?
What's that? No, we're not going to fly them if they're not safe.
Questions. Okay. With the workers' visa thing, does that make it easier for you to tax these previously illegal immigrants?
Yeah. Well, easier. It makes we tax them.
And with the drug legalizing marijuana or whatever else you want to, have you put any thought into exactly how much money taxing something like that could raise towards things like paying on the devastated unemployed?
Taxing marijuana, it's estimated, would raise between $7 and $11 billion nationally. That would be putting a 50% tax on marijuana and still having the price of marijuana be about half of what it is now on the marketplace. So there are the numbers. more significant than taxing marijuana, I think, is the reduction that you have from law enforcement, the courts, and the prisons. And I don't see law enforcement going away at all. I just see law enforcement being able to redirect themselves toward real crime, as opposed to arguably victimless crime. Courts, they're always stressed for resources, and when it comes to the so this just takes away their need for more resources. And then when it comes to the prisons, hey, let's have fewer people incarcerated. Certainly individuals that arguably have only committed harm to themselves. Who hasn't said so?
I haven't. I just have one quick question and a clarification. In the, I'd say that the cannabis issue, there's a lot of confusion in it. In that there's medicinal cannabis, there's recreational cannabis, and then it gets to industrial cannabis, where farmers in Canada are getting $250 a profit per acre and sending products down to the United States that we are buying, and our farmers are not being allowed to grow it. If, as president, or when you are in office, would you be in favor of ending the prohibition of cannabis altogether, and then that leads to the entrepreneurs and the taxes and the regulations and the entrepreneurs being able to turn this agricultural product into viable value-added products?
Yeah, and I think that's analogous to probably hundreds of other examples also. Yes?
So your economic policy on jobs and overseas, we lose a lot of jobs to outsourcing, we lose a lot of jobs to illegal immigrants, we lose a lot of jobs to foreign companies that bring their corporate headquarters over. Are you suggesting that we should reduce taxes, reduce the restrictions on American companies, give tax incentives to bring back those corporations and manufacturing back to America, as I would?
Yeah, and by... yes, yeah.
And one more question. Do you support English as the primary language of America? As it is already in federal law?
Yeah, but just understand that now we're going to talk for a little bit about this dual language thing. What I hear as a criticism a lot is the fact that we print things in Spanish and we print things in English. And I'm so upset at the fact that they come over here and they don't know what they're supposed to do.
Correct.
Well, by printing up a language to let them know what they're supposed to do, that really goes a long way in helping that out. And just understand, well, legal immigrants. Let's talk about legal immigrants.
Federal law states very clearly you have to read and write English.
To be a citizen. To be a citizen.
Correct.
We're talking about the work visa.
A work visa, which I know from experience, a work visa also requires you to do an essay in English to be able to understand the language. Also, our street signs and everything else is in English. What sense does it make to have a driver's license test in Spanish?
What is your lineage when it comes to immigration?
My family immigrated here in 1623. Started in
from where?
From England.
England, so they knew English. Mine came from Russia, and my grandmother didn't know how to speak English.
My grandfather was German,
and he didn't either. So it took him about 7 years to assimilate. Well, statistically, it takes about 7 years.
But he came here legally.
Right,
My whole question is,
just
part of this whole program of giving them guest workers, are we going to teach them English too? Or are we going to continue to let them be... What he said about changing our culture, that's true. They've done it already. When I grew up, there was no walking into a McDonald's or a Burger King or a Home Depot and see signs in Spanish. Actually, in Florida, I could walk into a Walgreens and not see any signs in English.
I would just suggest that if you go back to 1600, that the phenomenon that existed in 1600 was a lot of people over here that did not speak English. Took them about 7 years to assimilate to speak English, which is the same statistic that applies today with Spanish. They really want to learn Spanish and do. It takes them about 7 years to do.
In 1697, in the 1700s, we had the highest literacy rate once they set up the school systems. highest literacy rate. of
Are
any
you saying that
Republic.
my grandma shouldn't have been over here from Russia because she couldn't speak English?
No, you're twisting my words.
No, I'm not.
Don't do that.
I mean, I'm just.
I'm saying to come here legally, it is a requirement to speak English, is it not?
Someone else.
Spanish could be a headache. I don't see the problem with that.
If you were president, what would you do with the
You've
stranglehold?
never lived in a place.
Being an
You have no
entrepreneur for 10 years?
experience.
I'm scared to death of hiring anybody because of the unions and what's going on with that. I mean, I really feel that they really have us, the whole country, in a stranglehold. And I have very good friends who are in unions and they hate it, but they have to because they work for the airlines. What can we do? Because I understand when they were formed, they were probably uneducated workers and it helped them get informed. But at this point, you know, we have literacy, we have internet, we have information. How would you deal with,
Well,
I mean, it's killing us.
I wouldn't advocate the busting up of unions. I'll tell you that from my own experience, that when it came to the union, I found the absolute best workers that I ever came across belonged to the union. Also, the worst workers that I ever came across belonged to the union. And I had to treat them equally, and I had to pay them equally. I couldn't reward the best, and I couldn't get rid of the worst. So in a free market society, employers ought to be able to readily hire whom they want. I mean, that's just my fundamental belief. Yes.
Governor, what's the best system of taxation that would be fair, most fair to everybody, and also most efficient? Like, it seems like the income tax has a lot of loopholes.
The gist of what I think you're saying is, should we reform taxation? With regard to a flat tax. That would be a great idea. I just, right now, beware when it comes to reforming taxes, because I think that reforming taxes right now is just code for raising taxes. What needs to take place right now, spending needs to be slashed. And that ought to be the focus. Excuse me.
Okay. The FDA recently was doing their Food Safety Act, which is written so broadly that they are allowed to come into your home and tell you how you can can your food out of your own garden. Now, what do you know about that, and what do you think should be done with it?
Just by the nature of your question, you all could just guess what I would have to say, I hope, regarding the answer.
Okay, would you put a rein on the FDA then?
Sure I would. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Come on. Have you not been listening to what I've been saying?
What you're saying. But I've also listened to other guys say, "Oh, I'm for the free market," or let the FDA and the USDA do these kind of things.
Nothing free market about that.
Way into that.
Could you name any departments you'd like to close if,
Yeah, just speaking the hypothetical.
Yeah, hypothetical.
Well, a couple just really blatantly stand out. One is the Department of Education, which give about 11 cents out of every dollar that the states spend, but that 11 cents comes with about 16 cents worth of strings. So it's just a negative to take federal educational money. And just the notion of states being able to innovate when it comes to education, or states being able to innovate, which is back to the Constitution, education would improve dramatically in this country if 50 states were left to be laboratories of innovation, as opposed to what we have today, which is just this top-down thing. So education stands out, so does housing and urban development. I think that those two really stand out most blatantly. Yes?
I guess I had a question about the regulation of Wall Street.
Regulation of Wall Street.
Yeah, well, I guess it's, since the deregulation of it, we've seen a lot of trading of over-the-counter derivatives and big things. They've been creating a lot of toxic hazards, which has been a really big problem for this country. Since they're driving us further into debt.
My understanding with regard to the financial meltdown was it was not due to lack of regulation in any way whatsoever, and that any future regulation wouldn't affect that in a positive way. That really these were decisions, really stupid decisions made by supposedly really smart people that weren't able to reap the benefits of those really stupid decisions, meaning they were not allowed to fail.
Aren't they continuing to do that to this day? I mean, even after we crashed.
Because I think that the government is propping them up. I think that's the culprit behind it going forward. So if you were to see a breakup of the bank or return to smaller banks, I mean, I've heard that Glass-Steagall. I don't want to speak. I don't want to misspeak here. So, but for the most part, regulation was not a factor, nor would it be a factor going forward. These were bad decisions. We're going to continue to have bad decisions in any industry. It's just that they weren't allowed to fail. That was the problem. Yeah. No.
When we did fail them out, it seemed to, I guess, what they say is it saved us from an even worse economic crisis.
That's what they said.
So how do you compensate, I guess, because people would really, really suffer if we didn't bail them out. However, there seems to be that problem interfering with the market.
So one of the factors in what I'm doing is that there have been a lot of really smart people that have gotten behind the initiative. Vernon Smith, I'm forgetting, Chapman University, about 14 PhD economists, Vernon Smith, Nobel Peace Prize winner in economics, they've kind of gotten behind this initiative, and we had a discussion all afternoon. All 14 PhD economists, Vernon Smith, all 14 were in agreement that if all of these institutions were to have allowed to, if they were to have failed, been allowed to fail, that the system would not have melted down. That was their conjecture, 100% conjecture that would have been the outcome.
We discussed this a little bit last night. I think it'd be fair to ask in front of the larger group, because you were a big fan of line item veto when you were governor. I think it would be a related question to ask what your thoughts are on a presidential signing statement. Whether you think the president should have the power to make an interpretation of a law that's passed by Congress as president.
Well, when you're president or when you're governor and you have that power, yeah, that's a good thing because that's you writing in those statements. You're shaking your head.
The president shouldn't be able to say that a law that's passed by Congress, he's not going to go along with.
No, absolutely not. But would allow, again, though, if you're elected to that position, you might find that as a useful tool. Well, you might. You might actually clarify why you're signing, or believe me, if you were in that position, you'd find it as a useful tool to your ends. You would. Yeah. Wait, I'm sorry, right there.
I was wondering what you think about the concept of JPA, which is in our area.
What's JPA?
It's a joint partnership alliance where the government and private business kind of can join in that they'll say, you build your business and I'll give you a tax break, a special tax break.
Sounds like a black box with a lot of smoke and mirrors to me. I wouldn't have signed it.
Well, it's going on in our community.
Yeah,
I think
got
the
it.
citizens need
Got
to
it.
be very much aware of that there's special turnback sales tax, special turnback property tax.
Benefiting a few and not all,
Right.
you know. Where are the policies that affect all of us equally, that we all get confidence from policies that we're all equal and we're confident and we buy things, and as a result of that, businesses hire because they have more of a demand for their goods and services. Yes.
I think it was Friedman that said, you know, if you're going to pay one guy not to raise pigs, then you got to pay everybody that's not raising pigs.
Right.
You know, that would solve a lot of the problems in D.C.
Oh, was it Milton Friedman
That Friedman.
Oh, was it Friedman that who went to the Panama Canal and said they're digging this by hand? And they said, well, this is a jobs project. And that person said, well, then why don't you have them do it with spoons?
Do you have any thoughts that if you were to take office, how would you get us back to the Constitution? Do you have any ideas of like the first step?
Well, I think an adherence to the Constitution, period, and
Yeah.
that would play itself out, I think, on a daily basis. I really believe that.
Rule of law.
Rule of law.
As a constitutional republic.
As a constitutional republic. We do not live in a democracy.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. We've gotten to the point where we've voted ourselves a raise, and it's not sustainable.
I do have an actual question on nullification. I was thinking recently about FDR when he took those Japanese from the western states and put them in concentration camps. Those citizens couldn't depend on their state to protect them from the Fed. Who would? You know, nobody did. And he was allowed to just take them and all their property. But nullification's got a bad name right now. What do you think there's any way we'll ever get that separation in?
We talked about nullification last night, and I'm just sorry that I'm not as clear on the term as I should be.
Read Tom Wood's book.
Nullification, real simple. Nullification is the act of undoing constitutional acts imposed by the federal government.
As a sovereign
state.
Right,
Which
right.
goes back to the rule of law. If you're going to support the Constitution, the rule of law, then that also means sovereignty, 10th Amendment, and everything else.
Thank you all very much. Really.